Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Engaging Colleges and Universities on Climate Change. My name is Clara Fang. I am the Student Engagement Coordinator. Today, we're going to hear from two speakers who are involved in supporting students on climate change in higher education. So I started volunteering with CCL in 2016, and I serve as the Student Engagement Coordinator. I help students, I oversee CCL campus chapters, and help members conduct outreach to higher education. I have over 15 years of experience in sustainability and higher education before I started with CCL. So today we are going to have Piper Christian. She is a rising junior at University of Utah and a member of CCL's governing board. In 2018, Piper worked with CCL volunteers and students to pass a resolution through the Utah State Legislature which recognized the impact of climate change and encouraged emissions reductions. As an advocate of youth engagement in environmental causes, she has spoken on youth panels at Citizens Climate Lobby regional and national conferences, organized Utah's first Youth Environmental Summit in 2017, and gave a TEDx talk on climate change communication in 2016. She was also a 2020 American Climate Leadership Awards finalist from Eco America. Brian Etling has been a CCL volunteer for 8 years and has attended numerous town halls in Oregon. He was lead presenter on the 2017 Oregon Stewardship Tour, which traveled to cities in rural, eastern, central, and southern Oregon in October 2017 to promote CCL. This year, his efforts were instrumental in leading a group of students to push Oregon Governor Kate Brown to sign a bold climate executive order aimed to cut Oregon's greenhouse gas emissions. Over the past 10 years, Brian has given over 200 climate talks in 11 states, Canada, and Washington, D.C. as a CCL volunteer, climate reality leader, Toastmaster, and seasonal park ranger at Crater Lake National Park. So I also need to share my screen so you can see my presentation. So we will have some time for the speakers to present, and then about 5-10 minutes at the end for questions. So we'll put this into presenter mode. All right, Piper.
Thank you so much, Clara. So it's such a pleasure to be on this and have the opportunity. I'm having trouble seeing the screen. I might.
I'd say that also.
Can folks see the slides? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry.
Make sure it wasn't just me. Yeah, so thank you so much, Claire. I'm so honored to get to be a part of this panel, especially sharing with Brian. It's clear that he's done extraordinary work within Oregon. So, following the CCL way, I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about myself and my values and how they have really corresponded to my passion about engaging with CCL. So I was born and raised in Logan, Utah, and I've lived in Utah for my whole life. And for me, I think Utah is, I'm a little bit biased, but one of the most beautiful states in the country. And I love hiking and kayaking, skiing, and spending a lot of time outdoors. So my home is really a special place for me. But unfortunately, as you can see on the picture on the right, while the Cache Valley, the place where I grew up, is a gorgeous place to recreate and live, it also has been ranked among the top 10 worst cities in the country for short-term air pollution. And so my entry into environmental engagement was in elementary school when I was not allowed to go outside for recess on particular days of the year because the air pollution was so toxic for our young lungs. And so as I got older, I came to realize that the emissions that in part were contributing to the particulate matter and air problems within my community were also contributing to this broader problem of climate change. And so I became really intrigued and eager to get involved in this important issue. And so when I was 15 years old, I had the opportunity to self-fundraise and go to the COP21 Paris Climate Accords, where I became really aware of the capacity of people to take action in their own communities to bring about change. And when I returned to Utah, I was so eager to find a way to get involved. I think one of my biggest concerns, though, was finding an organization that worked at the scale of the problem. It felt really frustrating to take bite-sized pieces. And so CCL really provided that opportunity, working in tandem for a common goal. So that's a little bit about me. So I was asked to share a bit about some of the ways that CCL has supported me throughout my work. And I think first it's important to talk about the national level. So while it's extraordinary we get to share in this capacity, and I can't underscore how important it is to get young people from your chapter or your state to the national conference or regional conferences if possible. I think a great testament to the impact it's had on Utah is that I've had the chance to go with students from Weber State University, University of Utah, BYU, and elsewhere. And of the 4 different students who I know who've been able to attend, they have started their own environmental organizations at 4 different universities in Utah after attending the conference, just to show the impact that and the inspiration that comes from getting to attend this. And it's given me an invaluable community and the belief that I can speak to people in power and really share my values and be heard. Next, I wanted to share about the importance of local support and how much mentorship of CCL volunteers has been critical to my own engagement in my state. So you can see in both of these photos, and he always tries to kind of, be in the background, that there is an older gentleman, and that is Jack Green. He's a longtime CCL volunteer, and Jack was the one who proposed to my environmental club to introduce a resolution urging our state legislatures to address climate change within the state of Utah. And we passed that resolution in 2018, which was a really historical moment for our state. It could not have been accomplished without a score of CCL volunteers scheduling meetings with our legislators and representatives throughout the state and showing up to hearings and supporting us. And so what I saw was that they put themselves out there and said, while we want you to support, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, we also are here to show up for you and show that, this kind of legislation and climate legislation matters. And that really meant a lot to me and made me feel at home. And finally, as we're talking about higher ed, I think it's so important to talk about the mentorship within CCL higher ed that I've received while attending the University of Utah. So on our left, I apologize, it's a bit pixelated, but this is Regina Pistilli, and she is a fantastic CCL volunteer. And she reached out to me as a freshman at University of Utah and helped me get our environmental club off the ground. And another pixelated photo, what you can see here is the hill above BYU during one of their, the infamous football game that is sometimes known as the Holy War between University of Utah and Brigham Young University. And what we decided to do is, so University of Utah's colors are red and BYU's colors are blue. And so we decided to light a purple Y on the hill to show a combination of our school colors and the fact that our schools can come together on climate. So we were able to get a lot of press and get the attention of Congressmember Mitt Romney to show that we wanted to come together on climate. And Regina was influential and so important in helping out with these efforts. And briefly, I think it's important to also mention that Regina was able to organize a climate concert at Westminster College and do a lot of different creative ways to get youth engaged in ways that you would not typically expect. Perfect. And so finally, after kind of sharing my own story and the way I've felt supported by CCL, I just want to share some of the things I've gathered from the work I've done as a young activist, how I feel best supported by CCL volunteers. First, I think it's important to identify interested students. So for example, and I think Clara will touch upon this a bit later as well, but reaching out to professors in environmental areas at universities, seeing if there are youth engaged in other causes. There's been so much activism, which is so incredible to see, and showing up for those rallies or protests or places that young people are and getting to know them and seeing if there is some common ground that you can reach to find other interested activists. I've also found that it's important to create tiers of engagement. So different students have different amount of time and ability to engage, and that's absolutely fine. So if some students can only attend periodic events, that's totally okay. And also creating the space for students who want to start their own chapter at their college or university or organize their own event. But really checking in and seeing how much a young person can give and really working with them, I think is important to prevent burnout. Next, I think it's important to prioritize, to prioritize reciprocity and connect us to resources. So I think something that has been really incredible, Clara mentioned in my bio, I've had the pleasure of a lot of really cool opportunities. And as I've thought about it, CCL volunteers were the ones who connected me to many of them. For example, I was nominated for the TEDx Salt Lake City talk after speaking at a CCL regional conference, and a CCL volunteer nominated me to give a TEDx talk. And similarly with the American Climate Leadership Award, it was a CCL volunteer who forwarded me the information to apply for that. And this doesn't mean that you have to, but I just believe there are so many different ways that you can support the whole person. When you're working with a young person in CCL, find ways to really put their great work forward. Maybe write them a letter of recommendation if they're working, and just show that you care about them as a whole person. And finally, I think it's really critical to connect young people who are interested in CCL to other young folks in the organization. So we've had the opportunity to see a lot of amazing young people speak today, and just making sure that we can see people who are also engaged at the college level. I've been able to make so many amazing friends just by being connected through CCL mentors to other young people around the country. And I think it gives us a sense of being welcome and valued within the organization. So I would be happy to answer any questions, and I just can't express enough how grateful I am to have the opportunity to share, and especially great gratitude to Clara Fang for the extraordinary work that she does.
Thank you so much, Piper. And we're so grateful to your work and excited to see you grow and bloom in this process.
Thank you.
So next, I'd like to welcome Brian Etling, CCL volunteer and hired ally in Portland, Oregon.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, yes, my name is Brian Etling, and as you can see from the picture on the left, I was a park ranger, as Clara mentioned, at Crater Lake National Park for 25 years. And on the next slide, you can actually see a picture of Crater Lake National Park, deepest lake in the United States, one of the cleanest and purest bodies of water in the world. So it was such an inspiring place to work. And if you have a chance to visit there, it's really life-changing, inspiring. The problem is that, and you'll see on my next slide, is that climate change has been hitting Crater Lake, as it is everywhere else. In 2017, I was driving my car to Portland. My wife and I share a car, and I was able to fly back to Crater Lake. And I was tired of my parents and different people bragging about being able to see Crater Lake from the air. But the smoke from the forest fires in 2017 meant you could hardly see it. And on the ground, the pollution from the forest fires were so bad, it was really tough to breathe. And many visitors ended up canceling their vacation. So it was from seeing climate change in Crater Lake National Park and also in the Everglades that I got real involved in the climate movement. And 8 years ago, as you'll see from my next slide, I got involved with Citizens Climate Lobby, and I've been into Washington, D.C. 8 times to lobby. And by the way, I am so honored to follow Piper. She did an amazing job today, but if you get a chance to see, do see her June 2019 talk in Citizens Climate Lobby talk. I was in the front row, and it was an amazing talk, so I was very inspired by that talk. So yeah, so I've really enjoyed going to DC. I really enjoyed getting involved. And on the state level, I got involved with Renew Oregon. So Renew Oregon is kind of a coalition of different tribes in Oregon, different Native American tribes, business owners, labor groups, communities of color, all coming together to try to get some state carbon pricing done. And if you'll see on the next slide, what we tried to work on was called a cap and trade. Oregon's constitution is set up that we cannot do carbon fee and dividend. Basically, if we would raise any kind of revenue, it have to go to transportation. So it was decided on the state level for the climate organizers, we were going to push for cap and trade legislation. So what you'll see in the next slide is that I made many trips to the state capitol to lobby my state legislators, my state senator, my state representative. And by the way, if you feel a little intimidated by lobbying your members of Congress, I think it's fun to actually start with lobbying your state legislators. And by the way, your state legislators often know your members of Congress, and they can actually give you some good advice for also reaching out to your members of Congress too. So I made numerous trips to Salem, and you'll see on the next slide that we were actually successful in 2019 in that we got the votes in the House to pass our carbon pricing bill, our cap and trade bill called the Clean Energy Jobs Bill. And we had the votes to pass it in the Senate, but you'll see in the next slide, in the next slide, that we weren't able to get it done because Oregon is actually one of 4 states where you have to have a 2/3 quorum, meaning that over 60%, or actually a 2/3, over two-thirds of the members of each chamber that has to vote on a bill for it to pass. And so what the Republicans did, unfortunately, is they fled the state, and we weren't able to get the bill passed. It was very crushing in 2019. And so it was kind of like, where do we go from here? So what happened is that during the summer of 2019, the state legislature was not able to get past our state carbon pricing bill, but they were very proud of themselves that they got their Student Success Act passed to provide $1 billion in spending for kindergarten through high schools in Oregon. And so the state legislators were going to go around the state and pat themselves on the back and try to educate folks about their Student Success Act. But what happened is that high school students and young adults and college students kept showing up at their events saying, we want something done on climate change. And so never underestimate your voices, because what happened in the next legislative session then is that the state legislators knew that they had to act on climate change. So Renew Oregon, we had another huge rally in February at the state capitol. We lobbied all our state senators and state representatives to try to pass another bill. And again, we had the votes to pass a bill, but there was another Republican walkout. So it was not able to succeed. And by the way, Citizens Climate Lobby, we are nonpartisan, and we really tried to reach out to Republicans on this, but they weren't interested in supporting this climate solution. So again, it was very, very sad that we could not get this done, because we were hoping to get a state bill passed, carbon pricing, to create kind of a patchwork that would put pressure on Congress to pass legislation. But the governor, and you go ahead and go to the next slide there, what happens is that the governor did not give up. And because the youth kept showing up to Oregon, the college students, high school students, and junior high, even grade school students, that she was determined to do something done. So she signed in March really strong executive climate actions to act on climate change. And you'll see in the next slide that when our governor, Kate Brown, whenever she tried to make any kind of announcement on climate change, she always surrounded herself by youth there. So youth voices are so important. And for elected leaders who are concerned about climate change, they really do want to hear from youth, and they want to be allied with youth on this. To the left of our governor, Kate Brown, is one of our volunteers, Citizen Climate Lobby volunteers, Charlie Abrams. And you'll see in our next slide that they've had all kind of youth rallies in Oregon to try to connect with our Oregon legislators, and I was involved with their most recent one. And so how can you get involved with the youth? So here's a few of my tips here. So you can go to the next slide now. And number one, I would just offer to carpool and show up. So what happened to me is that I went to Salem, I lost track probably 50, 60, 70 times, and I always had rides to Salem from friends. And what would happen is that after the adults were done lobbying, the students were not done. But Charlie needed a ride to Salem, and none of the adults had the time or the energy to give him a ride, but I jumped on it because of all the rides that I'd received. And Charlie and the other students were so appreciative of me and showing up just to support them at this event. So number one, I think it speaks so much to just show up just to support the college students and youth for climate action. My second tip is include college students and youth and grade school students in your lobby meetings. Our most recent co-sponsor is Federica Wilson, or Representative Federica Wilson of Florida. And I just happened to be in that June meeting for last year to help get our 80th co-sponsor. And you're not necessarily going to see any youth in this picture, but our the liaison, John Van Leer, who's just to the right of me, I asked John, I said, how were we able to be so successful? And John said, in district meetings, we made sure we had college students and youth in these meetings, and it made a big impact. So do what you can to include youth in your lobby meetings. And my next tip is invite the youth to speak to local climate and community groups. Here's Charlie, again, at the lectern, and his friend Jeremy Clark. And if you'll see in the next slide, I actually had both of them speak at our local climate reality meeting. So there's other climate groups in your area. This is in Portland, that are always looking for speakers. They especially want to hear from youth. They want to hear how youth can get involved, how they can partner with youth. And so this was a big turnout, big success, having some CCL youth speak to our local climate reality meeting. Next slide. And I would also think it's so important that when you talk about youth and engage youth, is to share stories of success. So whenever I give a presentation to college students, high school students, middle students, etc., I share this story, and I took a screenshot this is from the September 2017 Citizens Climate Lobby blog. This was 14 high school students from Traverse City, Michigan, who fundraised to go to Washington, D.C. in 2017. They got a face-to-face meeting with their member of Congress, Republican Jack Bergman, and they asked him on the spot to join the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, and he did. And so I always share this story. So the group leader in Traverse City, Lisa DeBono, did an amazing job of organizing these youth, as well as the high school student, Elliot Smith. So I always share this story of when we get together and organize and we get youth involved and youth get very involved, we can have big success. And I think that's it for as far as my slides.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's so inspiring to hear about those stories, and there's so many ways that adults can support young people in doing this work. So I'm going to share a little bit about how you can support students, how you can find them. So if you connect with us through our website or our social media platforms, I post on there every day things that articles and opportunities that you can pass on to youths, ways that you can get involved. So if you don't really know of youth who really want to get involved in climate change in your area, what you can do is reach out to some schools around you. So are there local colleges or universities? What about your alma mater? Strategic schools, like are you more interested in targeting liberal arts schools or public schools? Do they have environmental studies departments? Where do you already have connections? And then you want to find an ally at your target school. So that might be a CCL member who works at the college, or the sustainability director, a civic engagement director, or environmental studies professors. So those are people who already care about the issue and would be your natural allies. So you can research contacts at those schools. We actually have done a lot of this work already. So you might contact me to find out if people have already been reaching out to people at the schools that you're looking at. And I also have template outreach emails. So you can get an idea of how to write those emails to people. Be polite and persistent, and be concise. So on our website, citizensclimatehighered.org, I have links to a lot of toolkits. So there's information on how to start a student chapter, how to sample outreach emails, storytelling toolkit, template presentations geared towards a higher ed audience. Regional conferences are great events to introduce young people to CCL. It's much closer than DC. And they usually give discounts to young people, and it's a day or 2 days where they can get to know us face to face and know how they can contribute as young people. I host monthly calls on the first Monday of each month at 9 p.m. Eastern, and any student or non-student is welcome to join. And then you can contact us at highered@citizensclimatelobby.org or find us online at citizensclimatehighered.org. And using those methods, like once you find someone who is really inspired to do this work, a young person, then using the suggestions that Brian and Piper brought up, they're going to do an amazing job, and you'll be so inspired by what young people can do. So I believe we have 5 more minutes for questions, if you'd like to pass them on to the speakers.
Yeah, so if anybody has some outstanding questions, you can send them to Ask Me through the chat. We do have a couple that have come in. So this is for Piper. What are some of the most popular types of youth organized events or programs that you have done?
And these are events like I've organized on my campus, or?
I think that's open for you to interpret.
Okay, yeah. I don't know, for our environmental group, while we work and we endorse CCL and have done work to support them, we also wanted to really connect to the community. So some of our most popular events have been educational forums about local community issues. For example, we have an inland port that is being created, a huge trucking center in Utah that's going to significantly worsen our air quality. So hosting those, we've gotten over 100 people at educational events. We also organized a school walkout for the March for Climate back in September of 2019. And so those larger events, educational opportunities, marches, that's a great way, I think, to kind of get the foot in the door with other students, and then speaking to them, bringing a mailing list to get folks to sign up, to get them to come to your regular meetings has been really effective for kind of building our base of club members.
Great. And then also, I believe this is also for Piper, but anyone else can jump in. How can youth, specifically high schoolers, become more involved with CCL?
Great question. It was so incredible just finding CCL as a high school student. I think going to a local chapter meeting can be a really wonderful start. And just reaching out, and especially finding someone in CCL who might be interested in kind of mentoring you, for me was so valuable. As I mentioned, Jack Green, a CCL volunteer, not only helped me get acquainted with CCL, but supported my work as the president of an environmental club as well. So I think attending a chapter meeting, and also, I know there's a wide range of CCL resources specifically tailored to high school students that I'm sure Clara could speak more to as well. And I think that's really important. And lastly, definitely attending city council meetings and going to the state legislature, learning about local environmental politics helped me a ton.
Awesome. For Clara, what if you already work at a university? Is there any sort of conflict of interest promoting CCL to students or faculty?
Great. Yeah, no, if you work at a university, you're a really powerful ally. So students can do anything they want, really, in regards to advocacy. You know, they can advocate for political candidates. They can advocate for specific bills. Where there might be a conflict of interest is if you are doing that as part of a class, like on a specific policy or candidate. But if you just give the opportunity to students and let them do whatever they want, then you're fine.
And then kind of to piggyback on another university question, we have, since students move on, is it essential to get a faculty or staff member involved on any given campus?
Yes, that really helps, so we can have some continuity, and then you know, the faculty member also can give the student advice on special things on like getting a campus started or resources specific to that campus. So we definitely recommend that, but we certainly have students do this without a lot of involvement from staff or faculty.
And for Brian, we got a quick question on what is a climate reality meeting?
Great question. That's actually the group that Al Gore started, and you'll see a lot of us wear these green rings. Al Gore started Climate Reality at the same time that Citizens Climate Lobby started, and they were doing trainings a few times a year in different parts of the United States, but they've had to go virtual now. Their next one is in like July. So the trainings are amazing with Climate Reality. They're like 3-day trainings led by Al Gore. You get a copy of his presentation, and that's kind of a community of climate leaders also.
And I see we're pretty close on time. So for Clara, this is another quick question. How does the higher ed team also work, or sorry, does the higher ed team also work on getting university endorsements?
Yes, we do that. So the most effective way to do this is to get a student who is really wants to do this and passionate about this, and have them rally their peers and advocate to their sustainability committee, and then advocate to the president.
Thank you. And I think that's it on time. Am I right?
That's it.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you everybody so much for joining us. We hope you learned lots about youth engagement. Get in touch at higher ed at Citizens Climate Lobby if you have any more questions. I believe we
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Citizens Climate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.